Hello, welcome to some video notes. Today we will be talking about food and nutrition. So we'll be talking about the different things that you need to have in your diet in order to have a balanced diet that allows you to grow healthy and safely and to maintain homeostasis for all the different cells, all the different needs that your body has. And then we'll get into a discussion about what healthiness is and what are the different ways we might measure healthiness if you are actually following a balanced diet.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
So obviously you've already heard over the years of the 7 characteristics of a living thing, and nutrition is one of those things, right? The Mrs. H. Gren acronym you've heard before. And so we need nutrition. All living things on some level must eat material or consume material or digest material in some way in order to get those basic building blocks. Now, part of the reason is, of course, to make more things or to continue to grow. And the other reason, of course, is for energy. So when we think about our diets, why do we actually need food? What are the reasonings behind eating carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, right? So the first one, obviously, is growth. If you're going to increase in size, there is a limit, remember, on how large a cell can be. Remember the surface area to volume ratio that we talked about in grade 9. So since there's a very limited size that a cell can actually be, if we're going to increase the size of a living thing, if a plant is going to get taller and grow into a tree or a bush, if a small child is going to grow into a large human being, an adult, they're going to need more cells. And so in order to have growth, we must have lots and lots of mitosis. Now, in order to make new cells, we need the building materials that cells are going to be made out of. You remember that we have the cell membrane, a very important part of the cell, right, defining the inside and the outside of the cell. That's going to be made out of phospholipids, so we need lots of lipids in our diet in order to build those membranes. Remember that a cell is mostly protein, right? All right, all these different enzymes and transport channels and other skeletal structures that are inside of our cells, they're all made out of proteins. And so we need a lot of protein, a lot of amino acids in our diet in order to use them to build new structures when we make new cells. So we need it for growth. Then, of course, we need it for energy. So a living thing has to go through respiration. Remember, that's also coming from the Mrs. H. Gren acronym. Respiration, again, is that breaking down of materials, breaking bonds between atoms in order to get energy out of them, right? So we must consume material to use as an energy source. Now, we mostly will use carbohydrates. Remember, glucose is a fantastic energy source. We break it down very easily. We get a lot of energy out of it through aerobic respiration. We can get 32 ATP out of a single glucose. But we can also use fats and proteins when carbohydrates are not necessarily readily available in the environment, right? So breaking down carbs, fats, proteins through respiration to make ATP. And then, of course, repair, right? Even if you meet your, highest growing point, your maximum size, you're not growing anymore, you still get damaged. Your cells need to be replaced. And even if you, completely protected yourself and you didn't fall down and scrape your knee or something, you still have to replace your cells because cells don't live forever. They don't normally live, they have lifespans that are shorter than the total organism. Give you an example would be like the red blood cells. Red blood cells only really live for about 120 days, and then they die. And so if you don't constantly replace your blood, you will run out of red blood cells, and that would be a big problem because you need that for transporting oxygen around your body. Same thing with your layers of skin. You're constantly losing skin cells on the outer part of your body, and so you need to replace those layers of skin as they get worn away. And so the skin cells that are alive deep under the layers of skin, they still need to do some mitosis and make more copies of them in order to repair this constant damage. So obviously, because we are constantly dying, we must make new cells to replace those old ones that are lost through mitosis. So these are the main reasons for why we have to consume things at all. Now, because the three main biological molecules of carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, because there's a lot of energy in them. We're actually going to talk a little bit later about how much energy per gram we see inside those different types of biological molecules. We tend to prefer meals that are a nice mix of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. And when you think about that, you think about a lunch. If you could have any lunch you wanted right now, or you could have any dinner that you wanted right now, you're probably thinking of foods or like a combination of these things. We don't want to just eat bread. This bread tastes great, pasta tastes great, but we don't like just to have it by itself. We normally like to put other things in it partly because it makes it taste a little bit better, makes the taste a little more dynamic and interesting, but also the reason why we might feel it tastes better is because we do want to have a mix of that material in our diets. We don't just want to eat regular meat. We might want to be seasoning it with things. We want to accompany it with some vegetables on the side, right? So we don't just eat one of these types and that's it. But even if we're eating a nice balanced diet of carbohydrates and lipids and proteins in all of our different meals, there are other things that we have to have that luckily are already incorporated into lots of the vegetables and fruits and meats that we are eating. So if you have a nice balanced diet, you should also be getting enough of these other materials, right? So the other materials that you must consume in order to survive are things like vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, right? And things like minerals, which would be the charged ions of those different elements. So like we need iron, right, in order to make more hemoglobin. We need calcium in order to help with the formation of bones, right? So there's different elements that are necessary within a certain percent of what we're eating. We need to make sure that there's some raw elements in there as well. And then, of course, we need something like fiber. And so we're going to talk about fiber in a little bit more detail later, but fiber is basically this undigested material, or would be the cellulose. So you remember we talked about cellulose before. It's that complex sugar that cell walls are made out of, and we do not have the enzyme cellulase to digest it. So cellulose, when you're eating a large salad, most of that food, or most of the nutrients in the lettuce are not really going to help you in any way because you can't actually digest the cellulose. Right? That material that doesn't get digested, we call that fiber. And actually, fiber does play a very important role in keeping our bodies healthy, even though it doesn't actually go through into our body after it goes into our digestive system. All right. And then lastly, water. Of course, you've heard numerous times in your life, you should probably be drinking more water. Hot day, you've been running around outside, make sure you're drinking plenty of water. Water, we've already talked about all those amazing properties that water has. Of course, you need to have a lot of water inside of your body, so you need to be drinking enough of that. And no, things like soda pop or coffee or tea, those don't count because the more material dissolve into the water, the worse the water is at hydrating you. That's the reason why you can't just drink salt water if you're floating out in a raft in the middle of the ocean. If you drink salt water, it will actually make you thirstier because of all the dissolved materials will make it harder for you to absorb the water from the solution that you've been drinking. So the best thing you can be drinking is just pure water, or just regular tap water. You don't have to buy fancy water. Just regular tap water is all you need. Okay, so if any one of these materials is missing from your diet or you're not getting enough of it, your body will suffer. Maybe not immediately, but over a long period of time, there will be certain problems that will appear because you have what we call malnutrition, not the right types of nutrition, right levels of nutrition. Typically, people that grow up through malnutrition, they have very limited growth, so they're much skinnier and much shorter than they should be. Maybe looks, unhealthily skinny. Then we would see that they have really poor repair structures, so their immune system isn't going to be good, so that also means that disease would be more prevalent in their body. They're more likely to get sick because they don't have a well-developed immune system. And then when their skin, when they fall down and scrape themselves, their skin might not heal as quickly as with the other people. If their bones break, they might not settle as well and heal themselves as very well. And they might even possibly break more often, again, because they don't have enough of certain materials inside of their diet, so their body is not completely healthy, and so they're more likely to be damaged, and it will take longer for them to repair themselves. So you need to make sure that you have a nice balanced diet with all these different materials that we're going to be talking about today. So now let's go through each one of those groups of materials. Let's talk about what they are and why you need them. Like, what do they do in your body? So first up, we're going to talk about vitamins. All right, so vitamins, specifically if you're going to define the idea of a vitamin, is it's some type of organic compound that is required in relatively small amounts. Normally it's a few hundred micrograms at most, maybe 50 micrograms at most, in order to regulate and control a lot of different cellular metabolism, right? A lot of different chemical processes, right? A lot of vitamins can also help out with certain enzymatic reactions and also help with the formation of healthy proteins. So there's a large number of different types of vitamins, but we put them into certain categories based on kind of where we get them from, and then how they help out the body, what they tend to help, how they interact with our cells. And so you should know these vitamins. You should know like what they are, you should know why we need them, and then you have an idea of where they come from, right? That's the kind of material we are going to be hoping that you're learning through this. Okay, so let's start with the first one, vitamin A. Vitamin A, also known as keratin or retinol, so there's different versions of this, the structure that is vitamin A. Typically we get this in different types of meats like liver, dairy products like cheese and butter, and we also can get it from eggs. And you've probably heard before, retinol is really good for your vision, right? So the one retinol, like retina is the back part of your eye where you actually see, where the light hits, that allows you to see. So the pigments that are light sensitive pigments of your retina actually are partly formed through the use of vitamin A. And so you need a good amount of vitamin A in your diet to help keep your eyes nice and healthy, right? For someone who might have poor levels of vitamin A when they are developing, their eyes actually might not form correctly, and so they might be more likely to have near farsightedness or farsightedness because of issues with a low nutrition level through those important development parts of their life. Then we get into vitamin B. Now, vitamin B actually is a huge group. There's vitamin B1, vitamin B2, vitamin B3, B4, there's a B12, there's a B14. So we're not going to talk about all of those. You don't have to memorize all those different vitamin Bs. The one that we're going to focus on is just folic acid. So folic acid is one of many that we group into our vitamin B category. So we can get folic acid from cereals, from different types of vegetables and beans, mostly green vegetables. And you need it because it really helps reduce birth defects. And so you don't necessarily need folic acid right now as you're listening to this, but if you are a female and you intend to get pregnant at some point in your life, you will be recommended that you should be taking folic acid pills before you even get pregnant. So it's too late. If you find out you're pregnant and you haven't been taking folic acid, it's a little bit too late to even help. The folic acid is really, really important in the very early stages of the embryo growing into the very beginnings of the fetus. Right? And so if you don't have enough folic acid in your system, the folic acid isn't going to move through the circulatory system through the placenta into the fetus and help the development of the fetus. So it's very, very important that you have enough folic acid in your diet in general so that it's there, when you need it if you happen to become pregnant. Also, for males or for general human beings, there are some general enzyme activities that help with the folic acid helps along with. So it is good to have some of folic acid in your diet. Then getting into vitamin C, you guys have probably heard of vitamin C before. That's the one we think of with citruses. We think of orange juice as a really good sense of vitamin C. People think of vitamin C for their immune system as well, right? And so it helps catalyze a lot of different cellular reactions, also in terms of cellular respiration. It also helps with certain health with white blood cells, so it can help build your immune system. The thing is, a lot of people think, oh, if I just take a bunch of vitamin C while I'm sick, it will make me feel better. But actually, this process takes time. So if you're sick and then you just take a bunch of vitamin C pills, the vitamin C isn't really going to do anything to help you because you're going to get better before the vitamin C really takes effect. What you really should be doing is having a good amount of vitamin C in your diet normally so that you have a good immune system to fight off any diseases. Don't be reactionary with this. You shouldn't just take the vitamin C because you're sick. You should already be taking vitamin C or have vitamin C in your diet in order to help build your immune system. And that's pretty easy to get. Just oranges, lemons, other types of citrus fruits, have them every once in a while and you'll get plenty of vitamin C. Then we get into vitamin D, which obviously you've probably heard dealing with milk and lots of different dairy products. So we have this calciferol, which is this material found in various parts of the egg and mostly dairy products like cheese and milk. and butter. And it's really important for the development of your bones because you have to absorb calcium ions, all right, and we'll get into minerals in just a minute, in order to actually form these new bone cells, right? So if you have a bunch of calcium, but you don't have enough vitamin D, you're still not going to have like the best bone strength. So you actually need both calcium present in your diet, and you also need vitamin D to help you with the absorption of that calcium into the right cells in order to form your bones properly. And so, you know, vitamin D, it's pretty easy to get, and actually, to a certain extent, you can get vitamin D from other methods when you're exposed to sunlight in some ways, right? So vitamin D kind of comes naturally through a series of complicated chemical exchanges when your skin is exposed to sunlight. So just being outside, to a certain extent, you can get some vitamin D, but you still should be having vitamin D in your diet. You should be having some dairy product in some level every once in a while. And then we have our vitamin E. Vitamin E, there's a complicated name. We're not going to worry about the scientific name for vitamin E, but we will point out, or I will point out, that it is lipid soluble. That means it dissolves in fat material. It doesn't necessarily dissolve in water. It's kind of nonpolar. So it's one of the few vitamins that is lipid soluble. So we find this in lots of oils inside seeds and nuts. So a lot of plant-based oils is where we will see vitamin E also dissolved into that fatty material. And that's just good for maintaining different cellular structures. There are different materials, like components of the cell membrane that are going to help being built from vitamin E. Vitamin E is also really good for quality of your hair and your nails. If you really want strong nails and nice kind of like shimmery hair, that comes from certain compounds that are created in your body, and vitamin E helps with the creation of those compounds. So a good amount of vitamin E can help in your nail strength and your hair quality. And then the last one we're going to look at is vitamin K. Vitamin K we find typically in green vegetables, but we can also get some vitamin K from bacteria, E. coli, that live inside our large intestine. And we'll talk about that when we get to the digestive notes. And so there are some natural sources of vitamin K that you can already get from your body. You don't necessarily have to eat something to get your vitamin K. And this really just helps with the blood clotting process, which we'll talk about in more detail when we get to the circulation unit. But obviously, you need to form blood clots to help stop yourself from bleeding. So vitamin K can help out with that overall process. So these are the vitamins, the core vitamins that you need. Of course, vitamin B, there's a whole bunch of other ones we're not going to talk about. And the thing that's very popular for people to do is to take vitamin pills, like everyday vitamin supplements and things like that. And I will tell you this, and again, this isn't part of the curriculum. This is just my opinion that I feel like sharing with people whenever this topic comes up, is if you have a healthy diet, right? If you're eating 3 meals a day, you're eating varied types of fruits and vegetables and meats with your food, you don't need vitamin supplements. Because the vitamins that you consume, the amount of vitamins that you need for these different materials, there's plenty of them in those foods that you're eating. So you don't really need to be taking a pill that gives you even more of them. And then the other thing is that most of these vitamins, they cannot be stored inside of your body. So if I said, oh, guess what, you've already hit 100% of the vitamin A that you need for the day, and then you take a pill that gives you 400% more vitamin A, well, that 400% vitamin A that you just took, it's going to go into your body and then immediately get removed from your body because you can't keep it inside. There's no way to store this material inside your body. So taking vitamin supplements when you already are a generally healthy person and have a healthy diet is literally wasting money. You're eating money and then just kind of, pooping it out or urinating it out, depending which vitamin we're talking about. It's just going to go out of your body as waste material. So just don't do it. The people who should be taking vitamin supplements are people that have actual health problems that limits their ability to absorb different vitamins from their regular dietary consumption, or people that for some reason cannot consume certain materials. Like, for example, someone who's very, very lactose intolerant, they might avoid just all dairy in all forms. They might need a vitamin D supplement because they're not getting enough vitamin D because they're not eating dairy products. But again, if you have a regular healthy diet and you are a regular healthy person, you do not need vitamin supplements. It is a waste of money, and it will not make you better, will not make you healthier. And in some cases, it actually can make you unhealthy by overdosing on these vitamins. Okay, so moving on from the vitamins, now we're going to talk about the list of minerals that you need to know about. So mineral, similar to a vitamin, is that it is something that is needed to be consumed from your diet that's going to help out with different cellular processes, but it's not going to be a large compound, it's not going to be a big organic compound, it's just going to be the ion of a very specific element. So we're going to go through the different minerals that you need to consume, and again, just like with the vitamins, you should have an idea where they're coming from, and you should have an idea of why we need them. Well, what's their purpose inside of our body? So starting off with calcium, so calcium ions of Ca2+, you get those again from those dairy products that we talked about earlier on the next slide with vitamin D. Also, when you're consuming vitamin D, there's a really good chance that you're also consuming calcium, which is fantastic because you need both of them in order to maintain healthy bones, right? Strong bones, strong teeth are going to be coming from the absorption of this calcium and then it being used in those bone cells in order to repair themselves and make themselves dense and strong. Then we have iron. Obviously, iron we've talked about before with our hemoglobin. We can find that in various eggs, meats, leafy greens as well. Leafy vegetables have a good amount of iron in them. And so that's for making hemoglobin. Of course, we need for carrying oxygen inside of our blood. Then we have phosphorus. We need phosphorus. We can get it from different dairy sources, different types of meats like chicken, different types of vegetables like beets. And we're going to need this mostly for respiration and also can help out with the process of the formation for bones. For the respiration, the phosphorus, remember the phosphate group that is needed to make ADP into ATP, the triphosphate, right? We need 3 phosphate groups. That means we need phosphorus ions in order to form that. So that's where that phosphorus would be useful. With our potassium, right? Potassium comes from broccoli, leafy greens, different fruits, but obviously bananas are a really great source of potassium. So much potassium inside a banana. 1 banana and you are set on your potassium levels for the whole day. This is going to help balance fluids inside of your body. And also potassium is really important for making your nervous system work. So if you don't have enough potassium in your diet, you will have nerve function problems. And so you do need to make sure you have enough potassium. Same thing with sodium. Sodium is common formed with a lot of different salts that we use in cooking, and common table salt, for example, sodium chloride, there's sodium in that. So getting sodium is actually normally really easily. One of the problems we actually worry about is having too much sodium when you get older, right? When too high levels of sodium, when you're in your higher, in your 60s and 70s, actually can have a negative effect on the quality of heart muscles and can affect blood pressure. But you still need a certain amount of sodium in your diet, even at all ages. Again, that's there for maintaining blood pressure, and it's also another part of nerve function. Potassium and sodium work together to make your nerves function, so you need both of them to keep your nervous system, working. And then last we have iodine, which we can get in various types of seafoods. There are also various salts that's not on there, but there are some salts that you can get iodine from, and vegetables. Actually, iodine is so important that pretty much all common table salt has iodine added to it just to make sure that we're getting good levels of iodine in our diet, because it regulates a lot of different metabolism levels, but particularly it helps regulation of your thyroid, which is an important gland around your voice box in your neck. That regulates your whole body's metabolism levels. And if you don't have enough iodine in your diet, you can end up with hyperthyroidism, which means that your thyroid can actually expand. And so you can get this huge kind of like tumor-looking material forming in your neck. And we call it a goiter because of your poor iodine levels, right? Because it's affected the ability of your thyroid to regulate itself. So again, because iodine is so important, pretty much all salts used everywhere that you get from a store or used in restaurants actually has iodine already added into it to make sure that we keep enough iodine in our system. So with our minerals, just like I said with our vitamins, if you have a healthy diet, if you're having a regular balanced diet, eating diverse amount of foods, you will get these elements in the appropriate levels. So you don't really need to have an overdose of these elements by taking pills of calcium or taking an iron pill or a potassium pill. You can, because actually some ions you can store them, so you can maximize the storage of that material, but really overdosing on minerals isn't very useful. And so I don't recommend ever taking any type of supplements for these minerals unless, again, you have a specific health issue that requires you to do it, or for some reason there are dietary limitations that prevent you from getting those minerals regularly from a balanced diet. But if you have a regular, good diet, there's no reason to be worrying about taking supplements. Okay, so we talked about these important minerals, we talked about the important vitamins. Now let's talk about fiber. Let's explain what fiber is and why it's helpful to you. So fiber basically is anything that cannot be digested and absorbed into the body. And so this might be a little difficult to imagine, but you are basically a donut, okay? You have the mouth, which is the beginning of a tube called the alimentary canal, which we'll talk about when we get to the digestive system. And that tube runs through the middle of your body all the way to your anus, where it comes out of your body. So when you eat something, and it goes into your stomach, into your small intestine, it's actually technically not inside your body. It's just passing through that tube that goes through your body. So material has to be digested so it can actually be absorbed into your body. It has to move from the middle of your small intestine through the small intestine into your blood. And then once it's actually in your blood, in the tissues around your digestive system, that's when we say you've actually absorbed it. It's actually part of your body now, right? So because you have this tube moving through the middle of your body, any material that is not properly digested and is not absorbed then gets pushed out the back end of your body as waste material, all right? So fiber is essentially all of that waste material that cannot properly be digested because we don't have the enzymes to do it. So this will mostly be comprised of cellulose, because you remember cellulose is a very, very strong fibrous material used to make the plant cell walls and everything like that. And so because we don't have cellulase to break it down, those fibers, like we can break them apart into individual strands, but we can't really digest them into the small individual glucose molecules, which is what we need to do in order to absorb them into our body. So this material just moves through the small intestine, moves through the large intestine, and just becomes this fibrous material at the end of your digestive system. So no enzymes to really digest it, so it just passes from one end of the body to the other. Okay? That also means that there really isn't any nutritional value, but it is actually really important for your health. So even though you're not getting energy or important vitamins and minerals out of the lettuce that you're eating, it's actually really necessary to eat lettuce, to have a good amount of fiber in your diet. Because what fiber does is it helps clean out your digestive system by being this solid material that helps push the waste material through your body. So the thing is that you have all these little curves and corners in your large intestine and in your small intestine, which we'll look at more in detail when we get to the digestive unit. And so there's lots of places for waste material to kind of get stuck, and that can cause a lot of other problems. It can lead to bloatingness, it can lead to gas, and if it gets really, really bad, it can lead to sometimes infections. So like bacterial infections can sometimes get a hold on your digestive system because of that material. So to help push this material through and get it out of your body, you have this undigested, more solid waste material called fiber that helps kind of clean out the digestive system as waste material moves through to eventually being released. The other reason why it's fantastic is it helps with the retainment of water. By having lots of this fibrous material in your digestive system, it helps you better regulate the absorption of water from your digestive system later on and keeps you better hydrated so that you waste less water through the process of digestion. Right? And then, of course, because it helps with the movement of this waste material, it helps prevent constipation. And so you've never heard that word before. Constipation means that you have to go to the bathroom, but you can't seem to go to the bathroom because it becomes very difficult to push that waste material out, right? Fiber can help make sure that that waste material isn't too solid, and so it should help with the movement of the waste material when you actually need to go to the bathroom. So things that are high in fiber, things that you should be eating, all right? Whole grain cereals, all right? So, white bread, whole grain bread, there's differences between the quality of the grain that's being used. White bread is fine, enjoy your white bread, but you should every once in a while be eating whole bread material, whole grain stuff. Lots of vegetables, of course, because of all the plant cell wall in those vegetables, and other types of whole grain materials as well. It's a really good source of fiber. All right, so we've talked about the main components that we can help with our digestive process, and then of course we have water. And of course water, because of all those things we've talked about before, those different properties that are super important to life, we do need a good amount of water inside of your body. Of course, water is necessary for any living thing to exist. Your cells are going to be mostly made up of cytoplasm, which is mostly made up of water. Your body tissue fluid is mostly made up of water. Your blood plasma is 55% water, right? So you need a lot of water in your diet to keep yourself hydrated. Typically, they recommend about 6 to 8 cups of water every day to avoid dehydration, but this actually varies greatly on the individual, on our own individual biology, on our diets, and on our activity levels, how much we might be sweating throughout the day. So the easiest way to kind of keep track of how hydrated you are is to look at the color of your urine, before you flush it down the toilet. If you have urine that's kind of in this lighter colors, right, then you're going to be okay if it's kind of a light palish yellow. If it's very, very clear, you're overhydrating, you're drinking too much water, and yes, that can cause health problems, so you don't want to be overhydrated. But if it's pretty dark yellow, very solid yellow, or even getting down to like a really dark brownish yellow, that's a problem. You should not be having urine come out that color. You are underhydrated, you're dehydrated basically, and you need to be drinking more water, and if that's occurring. Okay, obviously water has no nutritional value. It's just like the fiber. It doesn't give you energy. It doesn't help out with different biological processes, right? You don't use it for things. However, because of all of its unique properties, it is required for life to occur. Remember, we need it as a universal solvent, right? It helps dissolve those nutrients so that they can move around the cells, so they can move around your body. It helps with the transporting materials in the blood. About 70% of cytoplasm is water, so the general mass of a cell is mostly going to be made up of water, right? And then, of course, remember that it has a high heat capacity, so it can absorb a lot of energy that is released when all those enzymes are doing activities and are doing all those chemical reactions inside of your body. Remember your metabolism, right? All of those chemical reactions together, all happening throughout the course of your life. That is your metabolism, right? And so that produces a lot of heat. And so water being in your body helps absorb that heat so that, that heat doesn't get transferred to something else like your protein and end up denaturing it. All right? So, and then of course we need it to excrete waste material. It's much easier to get waste material like urea out of your body, get other waste material like feces out of your body when it's in a solution, right? It's in a wet environment, so you need a good amount of water in order to make sure that your evacuation of waste material goes smoothly. So make sure that you're drinking enough water throughout the day. Okay, so we're almost finished. We're just going to talk about the amount of energy that we get from these things that we are absorbing, and what is a recommended amount of energy for individuals depending on their activity levels. And then we're going to talk about how we can measure healthiness, or what's one way that we kind of measure how healthy an individual has been. So everything, of course, is going to need energy. So the reason why we've been eating carbohydrates and proteins and lipids is to get as much energy as possible in order to keep us functioning, right? We need lots and lots of ATP. Just contracting your muscles right now, if you're writing things down, if you're just moving your wrists and your fingers to hold your pencil, moving your eyes to like read the screen right now, that's using hundreds of thousands of ATP in order to do all this over the course of this lesson. So I mean, that's a lot of ATP, and you're not even doing something really difficult like, running a marathon or something like that. So we need tons of energy in order to keep our body alive. And so ATP is really this transfer molecule to help with the movement of energy from one part of the cell to the next part of the cell. And so the energy sources are really coming from the biological molecules that we break down through respiration. So our protein and our carbohydrates and our fats. Now, the exact amount of protein and carbohydrate and fat, or the amount of energy that is necessary in order to actually keep you alive, is going to vary significantly depending on different factors. So first off being your age. Typically, during rapid growth periods, like when you are going through your first growth stages, from age 1 to like 7, you're going through some pretty rapid growth, right? And then through puberty, you go through some really crazy rapid growth as well. And then maybe up to around age 27, 25, 27 is about the time that your metabolism really starts to slow down from your teenage years. And then getting into like your 30s and your 40s, your metabolism pretty much stabilizes. And then when you get to much older levels, like in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, typically we see metabolism actually decrease. So the quality of your life, or the quality of not your life, but the quality of the cells is starting to degrade a little bit as people age. And so the energy required to keep that body functioning degrades with it. That's typically why if you ever look at a menu at a restaurant or something that has a senior citizen sized plates, or like plates for people that are older, or a special menu that's for older generation people, they're typically smaller meals because normally older people don't end up having to eat so much because they have a lower metabolism. So as age progresses, you kind of have a bell curve where you're getting fat, you're getting a higher and higher metabolism, when then you'll start to drop off after you hit a certain point in your 30s and 40s. Okay, then you have your activity level. This would have a huge factor. If you sit around all day and just watch Netflix, you're not really moving your body very much, so you're not going to be burning as much energy, so you don't really require as much energy to replace the stuff that you burned. Versus if you're on various sports teams and you're spending all day running around doing different activities, doing different workout sessions and sprinting and playing different team sports, you're going to burn a ton of energy. And so you're going to have to need to eat a lot of food in order to replace the energy that you just burned through. And then also your genetics and your gender, right? So there are certain genes that can attribute to your metabolism level. So there are some people that are just naturally gifted with a high metabolism, so they can eat tons of food. Maybe they don't even really exercise all that much, but their body is kind of set at a level where they burn more energy than maybe a person of the same height and gender, and so they just seem to have a higher metabolism because of their genetics. And then you also have differences between men and women. Typically, men are larger, are taller than women. They normally have more mass than women. They have larger muscles than women. And so because of that, they have more cells. And the more cells in your body, the more energy you're going to need in order to keep all of them alive, because they're all doing all these different activities, to function as a group. Where women, who typically have smaller sized bodies, have less cells, so then they might not require as much energy, and therefore it would not require as much food in order to keep themselves going. Okay, when we're measuring energy and we're thinking about energy levels inside of an individual's diet, we measure this in a very specific unit. We use joules, but these numbers can get crazy high depending on what we're talking about. So we will also see kilojoules as a very common number instead of joules. So kilojoules are in thousands of joules. And then the other thing you should be considering is when we're thinking about our diet, if you need large amounts of energy, where is that energy coming from? How is it being dispersed amongst the different types of materials that you're eating, carbohydrates, proteins, or fats? Now, normally we like to mix these materials together. But when you think about getting the maximum amount of energy for the smallest amount of food, let's say you're on a diet, for example, or not a diet. Let's say that you don't have a lot of money, and so you need to make sure you're getting the energy levels you need, but you don't have a lot of money to spend on different types of food. What would be the best foods to be going after? Well, when we think about the energy levels in the different sources of energy that we have, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, your best bet would be going for highly fat food. Right, so very, very fatty things, like lots of dairy things, for example, because fat has significantly more energy per gram than carbohydrates and proteins. Carbohydrates have 16 kilojoules per gram, proteins 17 kilojoules per gram, so they're almost the same. Protein's a little bit better. Also, the digestion of protein is a little bit more efficient than digesting some carbohydrates. But really, if you're worried about like, getting as much energy from the dollar that you're spending on your food, you should go after fatty foods because that's where a lot of the energy is going to be kept, and 37 kilojoules per gram. That's also why our body tends to store extra energy in the form of fat, right? So actually, excessive proteins and excessive carbohydrates, we can actually modify them inside of our liver to change them into fats. We can add them to existing fat molecules. So eating large amounts of carbohydrates, you think, oh, I have a low-fat diet, but I'm eating lots of sugar, that sugar will make you fat as well because your body will convert the excessive sugars into fats. So you will get some glycogen, right? So glycogen is how we, glycogen, which is how we store excessive glucose. But then once the glycogen levels are where they need to be, and there's still excessive sugar in your body and your blood and your digestive system, you will convert that to fat as well. So, sugars, lots of amounts of sugar, that can still make you fat. Large amounts of proteins, excessive amounts of protein, that can still lead to fat forming on your body. But it makes sense that fat is how we store this excessive energy because it doesn't take up a lot of mass, right? So it's per gram, and we get way more energy versus storing it as carbohydrate or protein. And because we're animals, right, we got to be moving around, we got to be mobile, right? So we do need to store as much energy as possible within the smallest mass possible to keep ourselves agile, keep us moving around, during our activity levels. So that's why fat is the most common form of energy storage on our body. And if you are eating too much energy, if you're eating too many calories, regardless of what form those calories are in, you will still form fat deposits around different parts of your body to store that energy that you've consumed. All right, so when we're thinking about balancing our diet, we also have to think about where is this energy coming from and just the general mass, so the general amounts. You're eating almost twice as much energy coming from your fats versus your proteins and your carbohydrates. So you think about the level of fat that you're eating versus other types of sources of energy. And so the last thing we're going to talk about is what does that actually mean to be healthy, right? So let's say that you're actually having a balanced diet. You're having a relatively normal activity level, but what is healthy? Is it the Olympic athlete who has a very rigorous diet that has just the amount of energy needed to get through their rigorous training session and has less than 2% body fat on them and just looks incredibly cut and got a lot of defined muscles and things like that? Is that what healthy is supposed to be? Or is it someone, who's maybe 10 pounds overweight, 20 pounds overweight, but still, has, a good amount of healthy diet and diverse foods in their diet and does exercise every once in a while? So how would we want to measure what healthiness actually is? And the truth is that healthiness is really an individual's concept, right? Because healthiness is very, very complex. You have your body health, you have your mental health, you have your general health and happiness that you might be getting from your social interactions, you have your social health, right? And so when we're thinking about measuring healthiness, there isn't really one defining rule that says somebody is or is not healthy, or their life choices are or are not going to be healthy ones. But there are things that we can measure about us to indicate whether or not we are in a healthy area in terms of, for example, our overall body size, right? So this comes from the concept of what we call body mass index, or a BMI. So body mass index is a very simple calculation that can just use to determine if somebody is malnourished. And malnourished, mal is bad, right? And nourished meaning nourishment, basically means they have bad nutrition. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're overfed. It also means that they could be underfed, right? So malnourishment means that possibly is somebody overweight, meaning they have a larger body mass, or their body is larger than it should be based on their age and their height, right? Or underweight, is their body mass lower than it should be based on their age and their height, right? And maybe their sex as well. So there are different categories where we have the body mass index. We have someone who is underweight, which is it's a scale basically going from 0 all the way up to, I think you can go all the way up to 40 if necessary. And there's a range for it. And typically if you're under 18.5, you're underweight. If you're between 18.5 and 24.9, so just under 25, then you're normal weight. Overweight would be going from 25 to just below 30. Obese, which you've probably heard of that word before, is being significantly large body mass. That would be going from 30 to 35, or just under 35. And then if you're over 35 on this scale, you would be what we call extremely obese, right? So this would be obese to the point that you probably have some serious health problems, and we would really be pushing you towards major life changes in order to try to bring you back down on this scale. Similarly, if you're underweight, that is not good. There would be health problems with being underweight, and we would be trying to help you make certain life decisions, make life choices to push you back up towards more normal body weights. So in order to calculate a BMI, it's actually not really that complicated. You just need two numbers. You need the mass of the individual in kilograms, and you need the height of the individual in meters. And it does need to be those units. It must be kilograms, and it must be meters, because that's what the scale is set for, is those units. So you take the mass, and you're going to divide it by the square of the height. So take the height, square it, and then have that number get divided by the mass. All right, the mass dividing by that number, sorry. So that gives you units of kilograms per meter squared is what those numbers are representing. And so then what we do is we look on a BMI chart. And so we've got different colorings to kind of help you out of thinking about where you are in types of this scale. And so you look at the heights. Here they've got different conversions for pounds and feet and inches and centimeters and kilograms. But so basically, you could use centimeters instead of meters. It really kind of depends on the scale. But you need to be using really grams and meters, or what we need, kilograms and meters. And so basically, you calculate this number, and then you find that number on this chart based on what your height and what your weight is, and then that gives you the coloring, gives you an indication of whether or not you are overweight, or if you're obese, or if you're normal, or if you're underweight. So where you belong on this chart. So for example, here we can look at an individual. Let's use this. So we've got an individual who's 5'10", 178 pounds, right? Sorry, 5'10", or 177.8 centimeters. And let's say that they were 73 kilograms, right? And so we put this into our calculations, right? We could find our BMI here, because we already know these. We know that the BMI would show that that person is around a 22. It's really hard to draw on the screen. Sorry, guys. Around a 22, and this would indicate that they were healthy. Now, if they're at that same height, but they put on some weight. So this said here that they were 70. I said that they... Oh, can't see the number. Is it 79? Looks like it's a 79, but that doesn't make sense. Can't be 79. 75. Sorry, it's 75. 75 kilograms. Let's say they put on weight. Let's say that they went up to 82 kilograms, right? So they went to 82 kilograms here, right? So if we follow the scale down, we would see, actually they would be okay. Not 82, bad example. Sorry, guys. Let's say that they put on some weight and they went up to 86 kilograms. So 86 kilograms here, right? And so we follow this chart down. We would see that at that same height, 86 kilograms would make them a 26, which means they are now overweight. So they've gained too much weight. They're no longer their healthy weight. They've moved into the overweight category. And so when people are dealing with tracking their height, and they're tracking their changes in their weight, not their height, changes in their weights, they have to consider, where they are on this scale, right? And so again, this idea of like being healthy, overweight, obese, underweight, it's all about how you feel about your weight, but then also what is the standard that we might be using by comparing the average of human beings at that height and at that specific weight. And so you might be slightly overweight and you feel perfectly fine, and your BMI says that you're normal. That's fine. You don't necessarily have to make a bunch of life choices to move your BMI back down to normal. However, if your BMI indicates that you are in the extremely obese and obese area, it's probably highly recommended that you do something to keep your health in a more stable area, because when you have obese and extremely obese BMI numbers, that normally comes along with a lot of other problems that affect both the quality of your respiratory system and your circulatory system, which are very important systems that we'll be talking about this year. So if you've got some heavy BMI numbers or high BMI numbers, there's probably other health problems that are also a concern, and so you should be making life choices to try to lose that weight, because obviously you're not going to change your height, you really need to be changing your weight. Okay, and so here you can pause the video if you need to, and I want you to just practice using this this calculation of BMI and answer these questions, because you know you could be doing some BMI calculations on your tests. Wink, 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 wink. All right, so you pause the video, right? You actually tried these questions out. Yeah, so not super difficult. Let's just apply what we've learned about BMI. So here it says that a man has a mass of 75 kilograms and a height of 1.53 meters. Calculate the BMI, right? So remember, BMI is you take the mass and you divide it by the square of the height. So if you take 75 divided by 1.45 meters squared, or which would be 10.12 or 10 meters squared, that should get you a BMI of 35.7 grams. So then it wants you to say, deduce from the table on the side here, what does that mean? What does the value of 35.7 grams mean? That means if we look over here, it's only going up to obese. It doesn't go up to severely obese. He would be severely obese, all right, extremely obese because he's over 35. But here just saying that it is an obese person. You'd be classified as obese because it's over 30. Actually, you would be just over severely obese. And so then thinking about this, is there a relationship between height and BMI for fixed body mass? And so this idea, imagine that this person's height doesn't change, right? Sorry, the weight doesn't change, but the height changes. So imagine someone who was 75 kilograms, but was 2 meters instead of 1.45 meters, or was 1.35 meters instead of 1.45 meters. What would this relation be? And so you should understand that typically the taller a person is going to be, the smaller their BMI is going to be. So we'd say that there is a negative correlation, but it is not a linear relationship, but there is a negative correlation between this idea. So typically, someone who is the same mass but taller will have a smaller BMI, and that really comes from the idea that you have more body surface, right, to spread out the weight of that individual. So typically, taller individuals will be heavier than shorter individuals, but they also might end up being skinnier, having a lower BMI, because there's more area for the mass of those cells to be distributed amongst an individual. So this individual here in this example that has 35.7 as their BMI, if they were much taller at the same weight, their BMI would be obese. They might even be just slightly, they might just be overweight if they were tall enough to reach that scale. Okay, so that is it for these notes on nutrition. And if you have any question, let me know.